Hello, everybody. Afternoon. What a lively bunch. What's that? It's the rain. Sorry about that.
It's all your fault.
I wish I could do something about that. Just a short note on WTO membership. We welcome the finalization of Liberia and Afghanistan's terms of accession to the World Trade Organization on the 16th and 17th in Nairobi. For Afghanistan, accession to the WTO is a major step forward for the Afghan government's efforts to unlock the potential of the Afghan economy. Today's announcement is the result of years of work, which has accelerated over the last year under the leadership of the National Unity Government. WTO accession is a process, and the Afghan government needs to work with Parliament and other stakeholders to take steps needed to receive the full benefits of membership. Liberia's accession to WTO is the result of the resilient leadership of President Johnson Sirleaf and the Minister of Trade and Industry, Axel Addy. We applaud Liberia for completing an ambitious, high-quality accession package as a least developed country, and we look forward to working with Liberia in the future as a member. With that, Matt.
I just want to start really briefly with that. Do you have you don't have anything to say about the Libya agreement being signed?
Yeah, I can speak to that. The United States welcomes the signing of the political agreement in Morocco by Libyans, prepared based on a year of UN-facilitated political dialogue. The agreement provides the framework for establishing a unified Libyan government of national accord, and we applaud the efforts of those courageous Libyan leaders to rebuild a united Libya. I would also add that a government of national accord is needed to address the country's critical humanitarian, economic, and security challenges. As the December 13th conference in Rome, co-chaired by Secretary Kerry and the Italian Foreign Minister Gentiloni, at that conference, the United States and the international community made clear that we stand ready to support the implementation of the political agreement and are committed to providing the unified government full political backing and technical, economic, security, and counterterrorism assistance. We would also like to express our gratitude to the Kingdom of Morocco for its efforts to advance the UN talks and our full support to all of those Libyans participating in the process. The U.S. will stand with you as you take the next steps necessary to build Libyan peace and security.
Okay. As long as nobody has anything else about that, you do?
The reports in the British press right now that Downing Street would consider sending British troops to Libya if this new administration asked for it, peacekeeping forces. Do you have a position on that? And if the similar request was made to Washington, what kind of a response would there be?
Well, I won't speak to whatever decisions the United Kingdom might make. Those are sovereign decisions that governments make for themselves. I know of no such decision pending here in the United States, and that would be really more of a matter for the Defense Department to speak to.
So what I want to do is look ahead a little bit to tomorrow's meetings in
Sure,
New York.
Sure.
Do you expect that either the meeting in the morning of the support group or the Security Council meeting in the afternoon, well, what do you expect them to produce? I know the Security Council, you expect a resolution, but what do you expect to be in it? And do you expect them to put anything out after the morning meeting?
So, all right, well, let's go to the resolution first, since that we do hope that is the result, a tangible resolution that would affirm the process established by the ISSG and chart the next steps to begin negotiations. And as the Secretary has said, we are also laying the groundwork to implement a nationwide ceasefire. And so there could be components of that address sort of the framework of what a ceasefire might look like. So the big result for the afternoon session is obviously this resolution. And the Secretary remains confident that we can get there. In the morning, this meeting in the morning is the next iteration of the ISSG process. The Vienna process, as is also known. And I think what the participants are going to try to do in the morning session is provide or get to more detail about the political transition itself and the process, the framework going forward. Get to some more fidelity. I think they're going to be interested in getting a readout from Saudi leaders about the Riyadh conference, a little bit more detail about how that went and where things stand with the high negotiating committee of the opposition groups. Because their next task is to get together and establish a negotiating team. So I think there's going to be an expectation that Saudi leadership will be able to kind of read that out some more. I fully expect that they will be interested in talking to the Jordanian delegation about their efforts in terms of the identification of groups that can move forward in the political process. And then I think, pursuant to the ceasefire issue, I think you will see them spend a bit of time tomorrow morning on that. The Secretary has talked about the importance of getting a ceasefire in place for quite some time, and he believes, it's time to start laying out more detail about what that could look like, how that would be monitored, when it could be implemented, that kind of thing. So I think there's a full agenda, obviously, of things to talk about. But in the aggregate, what I would tell you is two things. This is an iterative process, so this is the next step in the Vienna process, another meeting. And that as the last two have borne out, what we would like after this one would be, again, more detail, more process that can be agreed upon going forward.
Right, but do you expect them to produce some kind of a document or a communique that would lay out what they've heard or what they've agreed on in terms
I can't rule out a communique at the end of the morning session, Matt. I don't know that they've come to.
All right.
I don't know that we're. I can't say that it will or won't be. There won't be a communique. The big product for the day, quite frankly, would be the resolution. At the end of the day.
So if there is a communique, and then in the resolution that the Secretary is confident will be passed by the Security Council, where in it will it spell out the timeline for Assad's departure?
I don't know that it will. I mean, I can't speak to a resolution that hasn't been solidified yet. So I don't know that is intended to be part of the resolution itself. The resolution is going to be designed to put under UN auspices and the UN umbrella, codifying under UN auspices the Vienna process and the culmination of the basic principles in the two communiques coming out of Vienna. So it's really designed to put under UN auspices what the ISSG has already worked out in terms of the core principles. And as you know, nowhere in those communiques has it been stated explicitly when Assad needs to go, when he needs to step down.
Right, so, why is that exactly?
Well, I think it's...
This is your goal, what you say is your goal, and it is what the opposition says is its goal. Correct? But it's not a guarantee, is it?
Our goal, just to be fair, I mean,
Can you guarantee that this process will lead to Assad's departure?
let me go back up here, because there's a lot you just...
No,
Yeah,
it's
but
pretty straightforward.
No,
Can you or can you not?
Let me get there, Matt.
Okay,
The goal is a whole, unified, pluralistic, non-sectarian Syria. That's the goal. And everybody, I say everybody, and Arshad gets on me. The members of the ISSG, if you look at the communiques, have agreed to that as the end state. And the ISSG has also agreed that it is far preferable to get to that goal through a political process instead of a military one, and that the Syrian voices need to be heard in that process, and that this has to lead us to a government inclusive and representative of the Syrian people, which cannot be Assad.
yeah, where is that, though?
No,
Okay.
I'm getting there. So you asked me, the first question you asked me is, why isn't it in there? And the answer is because not everybody agrees.
Exactly. Well, I knew the answer to the question, but I
But
wanted.
then why did you ask me?
Well, because I want to go back to the discussion that was being had yesterday. You guys are signing off on an agreement that does not guarantee or even mention what one of your main policy what you claim is your main policy goal, right?
Well, in the work of bringing 20 participants together, you know this better than me. I know you know this better than me. When you're trying to drive to a conclusion,
Yeah.
a very specific one, you got to start broad.
Right.
And so in Geneva, way back in 2012, and then of course we move forward to Vienna. If you look at the first communique, very, very broad, not as many participants. The second Vienna communique, more specific, more participants. And now, here at the third gathering of the ISSG, if all goes well tomorrow, we'll end up with a UN Security Council resolution with,
Right.
more solidification. So not everybody is unified about the future of Assad inside the ISSG. That comes as no surprise, I'm sure. And we understand that. What's important for the United States at this point in the process is that we keep driving towards the ultimate objective, which is a Syrian government away from Assad towards inclusiveness and representative of the Syrian people. And we understand that there's an awful lot of work that still has to go to get to that goal. And one of the key issues still outstanding is the future of Assad. And not only how long does he stay, but in what capacity does he stay? All that work still needs to be done.
Right.
And it is but don't mistake U.S. policy and U.S. objectives with the objectives being sought more broadly by 19 other participants. You can expect that not everything we may want to see in every way we want to see it is going to be reflected in the broader context.
I get it, but what you've just said is, what you won't get agreement on is how long he stays and what position he'll be in as he stays, correct?
I didn't say
the
we
key
won't-
word is stay.
I did not.
And
Hang
what
on.
my point is it really your belief that Assad has to go? Is that not more of an aspirational thing than it is a policy thing that you can actually bring about?
I think it could be both. Something can be aspirational and still be your policy.
Yeah,
Our
but
policy
then
hasn't changed.
then you would have to conduct yourself in a way that led to your aspiration going high. You're helping rebels who are not fighting Assad. You're
But are
agreeing,
fighting ISIL.
right? But your
I mean,
goal here is to get rid of
there's
Assad.
There's
you
two
say.
issues inside Syria.
Yeah,
Not-
but one of them is to get so your military assistance, such as it is not going to further your policy of getting rid
Because
of
our
Assad.
policy is there has to be a
No,
political
because
solution, not a military one.
When the secretary came into office, his entire point on Syria was that you had to change the calculation for Assad on the battlefield, change to do things that change his calculation. That has not worked. He's still there. His calculation hasn't changed. You're signing on to a Russian plan, am I right? That says nothing about Assad. Correct?
I think I'd take issue with some of what you just said, but there's so much in there. So look,
Well, how about the part about,
hang on a
does it
second.
mention Assad? I like that last question. Does it mention Assad
And I will
in the resolution that you plan on signing tomorrow?
I'm not going to get ahead of a resolution that hasn't been solidified yet, Justin. I just won't do it. So look, a couple of big points here that I'd like to make. Our view about Assad and his future has not changed. We still believe that he cannot be a part of the future of Syria. No,
Right.
please let me finish.
But John, you say it's our view, it's our belief.
It is. That is our policy. It has not changed. But the secretary has also said, and you've heard him yourself over
At the same time as you say that, though, you talk about how long he stays and in what position he stays,
in what capacity.
in what capacity he stays, has
you wanna
not
solve
yet been
this-
decided. And what I'm trying to say is that the key word in those phrases is stays, not goes. No?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But look,
All
if you
right,
come
I'm
to look, Matt, if you come to stay at my house, my expectation is eventually you're going to go.
Well, you know what they say
Especially
about,
you. All right. So,
you know what they say about fish and guests, right?
yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. So we understand that that during at least part of this political transition process, I've said this before. There hasn't been decisions made about whether he leaves on day one, week one, month one. The secretary said that himself. But that he has to go, that he has to give up power, that he cannot be the leader of Syria going forward,
Okay.
is not in dispute in terms of American policy.
But I don't
Not-
see anything in what you're doing, what's gonna happen tomorrow, or what has happened to this point that says that. That's my only point, and I'll stop.
Okay, long process. This is this is the third gathering of the ISSG. I fully expect there will be more. I can't sit here and tell you straight up that tomorrow is going to solve all the Assad issues. There is still disparity inside the ISSG about Assad and his future. No question about that. Nobody's arguing about that. That is why this process is so important. You know, you keep, and it's fair for you to say, well, there's nothing in the process. I don't see it. Fair. But the
It's been
process is still fairly nascent
The process has
in
been going-
development.
Well, no, it's not. It's 3 years old. It's based on the
This
Geneva.
particular
I know, I
format
understand that,
is.
but there has been zero movement on Assad for 3 years.
And it's
so
not it's not like we're being complacent about it or
Okay.
we're happy about it.
John, just to follow up on this point, wouldn't you say that priorities have shifted or have changed since you guys took the position back in 2011? Secretary Clinton said that he has to go and his days are numbered and so on. With the rise of ISIS, that the priorities have actually changed, where
No,
Assad
I-
might have
I
a
disagree.
role to play. I mean,
disagree.
considering that there are minorities and people and populations and communities that look to him as their
We
representative.
talked about this yesterday, and
Yeah.
I disagree. I mean, look, nothing's changed about our view that he can't be part of the future of Syria, that he needs to go. Nothing's changed about that. But you can't legislate diplomacy. It doesn't work like that. You don't sit down at a table with 19 other participants and say, you know, and here's the day he has to go. That would throw sand in the gears of this process faster than anything, and it would stop. And the secretary, quite the contrary, wants to keep the momentum going. And the way you do that is you bring everybody in, all of the stakeholders, and you start to discuss these issues of contention. That's what diplomacy is about. It's about dealing with the areas in which you disagree. And so there's still disagreements. We know that, and the process continues.
So let me ask you this: was it a mistake, basically, to state this as a goal? Did it hamstring you, string you in any way? Did it really hinder your process, sort of, constrain your elbow room and negotiation and so on by saying Assad must go, and stating this as a primary goal of the whole thing, rather than ending this in
I
a
don't
war,
think-
rather than bringing about some sort of a political transition?
I don't think the secretary would say that it's hampered the discussion at all. I mean, every participant in the ISSG has a view on Assad, and not all of them are the same. Many other nations share our same policies and with respect to Assad and his role in the future of Syria. Others do not, but some of those others who do not have influence with the Assad regime and have interest in Syria. And so those views have to be countered in and factored into the discussions, and they are, and they will be. But I don't want to leave you with the expectation that A, our position has changed on Assad, or B, that we're going to have this entirely wrapped up and sealed in a nice little Christmas gift, tomorrow. It's just not going to work that way. There's still a lot more work that has to be done.
For tomorrow, when we're a bit confused, if you could clarify, when the Jordanians come in and say this is the moderate opposition that are going to be part of the process, is that when it's going to happen during the morning session, or is it tomorrow, or is it thereafter?
Well, as I said yesterday, it's not like a homework assignment. It's not like we said, go here and
Right.
turn in the
I
list.
understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as I said to Matt, I think you can expect that the ISSG will be interested in hearing about Jordan's progress and the work that they're doing. It is going to be iterative. I can't tell you sitting here today that all of that's going to be resolved tomorrow, but certainly it's going to be a topic of discussion. Yeah,
John,
Nick.
along the same lines, you may remember what the secretary said in Greece a few weeks ago. He said basically that if we want to see the opposition and the regime starting cooperating and discussing, there should be a level of confidence that at the end of the day, Assad will go. So can we expect that, as Matt said, can we expect that this notion that Assad has to go without any timeline would appear in a UN resolution or a communique at the end of the meeting.
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the resolutions. It's not been solidified yet. That's a big function and task tomorrow to get at that, and I just won't get ahead of it. But the secretary wasn't wrong when he said, look, if you want to have political negotiations that include the opposition, with sitting down with the regime, you're not going to be able to get them to want to do that if there's not an expectation in their minds that Assad has to go, and that's been communicated. And they gathered in Riyadh. They came up with their own negotiating principles, and that's again all part of the process.
But should it be stated on paper that,
Should-
that at the end of the day Assad has to go, and that that the U.S., as you said yesterday, nobody has given up the notion that President Assad has to go? Can it be
There are
written
still
on-
differences of opinion about Assad and his specific future. I would point you back to the Vienna communique, the last one in November, though. It did talk about getting to a unified, pluralistic, non-sectarian whole Syria, right? Yes, I recognize it didn't say in there the 3 words, Assad must go, but it did talk about the kind of future that we were going to seek and the process through which we wanted to seek it. Political process, negotiation, inclusive of the Syrian voice. It's safe to say, I think factually, that you're not going to be able to achieve that goal, as stated in the Vienna communique, with Assad still retaining full power and being the leader of his country. But we're not ready yet, I don't think, to commit in writing the specific parameters. That's why these meetings are so important. That's why it still has to be discussed. But nothing's changed about our goal. I can't speak for every nation at the table. I can certainly speak for the United States. Nothing's changed about what we want to see in Syria, in particular, what we want to see from a responsive and representative government in Syria that Syrians can be proud of and that can help not only sustain their security and their safety, but their prosperity. Yeah, Justin.
I wanted to change topic.
You
The-
said you were done.
Well, yeah, but you just raised this unified, pluralistic, non-sectarian, and whole Syria. Prior to 2011, which of those adjectives applied to Syria?
Prior to 2011.
Prior to the uprising against him, would you say that Syria was unified then? Was it non-sectarian
I don't
then?
know. I'm not a
Was it
historian.
whole?
I'm not a historian. All I know is that prior to the demonstrations, he had a choice of how he handled them, and he handled it exactly the wrong way. Go ahead, Justin.
Did you have one on Syria? Yeah. Okay.
On the same topic. As you mentioned, one of the goals of the morning meeting is to look at the possible implementation of a ceasefire. How close is the connection between getting this ceasefire going and this list that's being drafted by Jordan on terrorists? In other words, if there is not a finalized list from Jordan, is the process of moving forward with a ceasefire going to be delayed until there's a list and agreement on that list of who's a terrorist?
It's certainly going to that work will help inform the work of getting to a ceasefire, and I think you can expect that some groups, whether they're on a list or not, I mean, if you're not willing to observe a ceasefire, then you're outside the parameters of a ceasefire. So I think it'll help inform those efforts, Pam. But if you're asking, does it have to be done prior to? I would say not necessarily, because the work of establishing the parameters of a ceasefire has to continue. And as I said, I think you can expect them to try to work their way through that tomorrow in New York. So, I mean, they're tandem efforts. They're related. And the Secretary believes they both need to move forward that way. Yeah. Laura?
Yeah, mine is on ISIS, so kind of switching gears, but still in Syria. There are some reports today that the U.S. Has sent another shipment of ammunition to the Syrian Arab rebels that are taking on ISIS. I was wondering, this is a little bit of a broad question, but if you can sort of give us an assessment of have these moderate rebels made any progress towards going after ISIS, and is that something that you can quantify for us?
I would really have to
Well, that's
refer
a
you to
broad
the
question.
Defense Department. Yeah, I mean, I'm not privy to information about material assistance to groups. That's really more for DoD to speak to. And as for specific, all I can say is broadly speaking, there are many groups that in the counter ISIL campaign that we have worked with and will continue to work with and support. Not all are Arab groups. Obviously, some are Kurdish groups. There's some Turkmen groups. But DoD is really in a better position to speak to progress on the ground, and I really try to stay away from that. But there has been, broadly speaking, many groups that have received support from the United States and from the coalition have made progress against ISIL inside Syria.
In terms of land, in terms of
Yeah, in terms
you
of
mentioned that.
territory retaken or regained, in terms of progress towards going after their infrastructure, their sources of revenue, and of course their loss of leadership at various levels.
Just one that, John. I know it's a DoD, maybe it's a DoD question, but apart from the Kurdish forces, even though you keep saying that all the weapons go to the Arab forces, who else has made any progress against ISIS, really?
Again, I think I'm not going to give you an operational battlefield readout here. There has been progress made by the Kurdish forces fighting ISIL have been very effective. There's no doubt about that. No question. And they continue to get support in terms of air power from the coalition. The other groups have made some progress too. I just don't have a readout here for you of every place on the battlefield and how it's going. But the groups fighting ISIL are not just Kurds. There are Turkmen, there are Arab groups, and they are fighting bravely. And to the degree that the coalition will continue to support them. Okay? Yeah. Well, why can't we go to Japan? Are you sure? Okay, go ahead.
Do you have any response to or comment on the acquittal of Japanese journalist Tatsuya Kato in South Korea?
I think I do. Somewhere in here. We are aware of reports that the Seoul Central District Court found Sankei Shimbun journalist Tatsuya Kato, is that right?
Yes.
Not guilty of defamation. We refer you to the South Korean government for details of this legal proceeding.
Do
you can. You can certainly give it a shot. Go ahead.
State Department, in its annual human reports of the South Korea, raised the concerns about the South Korean legal system on related to defamation. Following this judgment, what do you expect Korean government to do to improve its press freedom situation?
On this judgment, again, I'm going to refer you to the South Korean government. I think I'm not going to get into details on human rights issues in any one country. You can go to our website, look at our human rights report. It's all there. Virtually every country in the world, and it's publicly available where we express our views and our concerns. And we're not bashful about doing that. But in terms of this specific case, I'd refer you to the South Korean government.
So this specific case was mentioned in the
Rights report.
I've said all I'm going to say on this. Yeah, say.
Can we change topic?
Yeah.
Could I go to the Palestinian radiation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, there was a rather pernicious video that came out yesterday by an organization called Mturtsu that equates Israeli human rights activists with terrorists and others, and quite intimidating. It's against B'Tselem, against breaking the silence and so on. I wonder if you have any comment on that. And some say that it is actually financed and supported by the Israeli government.
Well, certainly aware of the reports. I don't have a lot of information on it at this time. As I would say, as we said in the past, that we want every government to do what it can to protect free expression and peaceful dissent, and to create an atmosphere where all voices are heard. I mean, if allegations like that are true, obviously that would be deeply concerning. But like I say, we're aware of it and we're monitoring it.
And I just want to follow up with two more questions, Justin, if I may. I hope you indulge me. One on the on December 3rd, the Israelis announced that they arrested some groups responsible for the terror attack in Duma, that killed the Dawabsha family. But today, the Israeli defense minister told the Israeli army radio that they don't have enough evidence. Although they know the group, they cannot bring evidence. Do you have confidence in the Israeli, in this case, in the Israeli justice system to bring those perpetrators to justice as you have demanded?
As we understand it, the investigation is still underway.
Right.
And we're going to wait and see what happens there. As I've also said before, you've heard me say it's critical that the perpetrators of the attack against this family are prosecuted and they're brought to justice. As you know, we've condemned this vicious terrorist attack in the strongest possible terms, and we again convey our deep condolences to the family. But for specific details about something that's under investigation, I'd refer you to Israeli authorities.
All right, and I have just a couple more. On the interview with Secretary Kerry with the New Yorker, he warned that Israel, there's no two-state solution. Israel is either headed towards not being Jewish or not being democratic, which many talk about. But are we likely to see any kind of movement towards reigniting the peace process, perhaps getting something going? Although everybody sort of discards that possibility in the next 10 months or so.
Well, I mean, that's really up for the parties to determine. We would still like to see progress made towards getting to a two-state solution, but it's going to take concerted effort by the parties. And as long as there continues to be violence and no affirmative action or steps taken to try to lay out a process forward, that's going to be exceedingly difficult. And the Secretary was very honest about that, not just when he was in the region, but at a speech at the Saban Forum. But we are still interested in trying to pursue that goal, but we can't do it alone.
I'm sorry, this is my last one. The Palestinian Authority, their law enforcement is, there are allegations of torture in Palestinian Authority jails and so on, of those are arrested at random and so on. I mean, you support Palestinian security forces, but obviously they are conducting, or there are allegations that they are conducting tortures against civilians and so on. Do you have any information on that? And if you do, are you doing anything about it?
I don't have any specific information on that. Obviously, if it's true, that also would be deeply concerning to us and an issue that we would obviously want authorities to look into and to stop. But I don't have any specifics on it.
While we're on this, in this area, I'm just wondering, and if you don't have anything, if maybe you could just check. I'm just wondering if there's an update on, if you have an update on the confidence building measures that were agreed to when the Secretary was in the region between the Israelis, the Jordanians, and to a certain extent the Palestinians, in particular the cameras.
I do not have an update on that.
Is that because there is no update?
I don't have an update on it. I'll take the question.
Would be not just whether the cameras are not a month later. It doesn't take a lot to string up some webcams or whatever. I'm just wondering if there is a holdup, what it is, and then on the incitement part. And you probably spoke about this while we were away with the Secretary, but if you haven't, could you do it now about President Abbas saying that the violence, the stabbing incidents, the car rammings?
No, we did address this.
justified?
We did address it, but I mean, I'll say the same thing, which is that we're not going to react to each and every comment, except to say that, and we've said it before, that we want to see affirmative action and steps taken by all sides here. To include, acts of rhetoric and other physical acts that do nothing but escalate the tension. So I don't want to characterize each and every event. Let me take your question on the cameras and the other measures.
But just on the comments, do you regard a statement like that from the PA president as incitement?
As I said, I'm not going to characterize each and every comment. What we want to see more broadly is that each side take positive steps
Okay. Have you
to
seen
reduce
that?
the tension and the violence. Well, look, clearly there still are acts of violence. And as the Secretary said in a speech not long ago, just before the trip, there continues to be incitement to acts of violence, and we need to see that stop. But I'm not going to characterize each and every
Right, I
comment.
understand that, but if you can't characterize what is incitement and what is not, how can you call for an end to it?
Because it still happens, it's still going on,
Yeah,
and
so-
but I'm not going to use the podium to react to each and every comment made and each and every statement. I think, incitement is a fairly self-evident thing. We want it to stop. To the degree that it leads to additional violence, that's not good for anybody there or in the region.
Except that it's not self-evident. To the people who are saying it, if they don't think they're inciting something, they're not going to stop doing it. If you think that it is incitement and others think that it is, then shouldn't it be called out as
And the
incitement?
secretary has. He's spoken
But you
very,
just
very
said you're not
baldly
gonna-
about acts of incitement and inflammatory rhetoric that we want to see stop. I know what you'd like me to do, which is to
No, I just want-
characterize each statement, and I won't do that.
Well, I want you to call a spade a spade. If you think that something's incitement and you think that someone is not
We-
doing what you've asked them to do, I would expect that the government of the United States would call them out on it and say, look, you shouldn't be saying things like this. But if you don't want to characterize every statement, then why even bother calling for an end to incitement?
We have made that argument, that exact argument, very clear publicly, and we've made it privately with leaders on all sides. Justin.
Thanks. I'd like to change the subject to the email controversy. You probably saw today that Ash Carter, it was reported that he'd been using his own private email account to conduct official business during the few first months of his tenure at the DoD in violation of DoD rules. And this was after the Clinton scandal broke. And back in October, you acknowledged that Secretary Kerry uses his private email and that it's scrubbed occasionally by State Department employees to see if he's conducting any official business. So is there really a difference between what he's doing and what Carter's doing? And have you found that he's been using his private email for official business since this whole Clinton story broke?
Well, I think the Pentagon has already spoken to Secretary Carter's email use, and I'm not going to characterize it. It wouldn't be appropriate. What I could say is what we said before, that Secretary Kerry primarily uses a state.gov email account for his daily work. And he takes the steps necessary to ensure that his records are appropriately captured, regardless of their origin. And his use of email is in line with department policy. So, to the degree that a private email is sent to him or used by him, it is appropriately preserved and captured and archived as it should be. But he does his work primarily on his state.gov account.
Would you also say that he occasionally uses his private email for work business, whether inadvertent or not?
It is, the short answer is of course. He can't prevent somebody from emailing him if they have his private email account. But when that happens, we have a process in place in a system, and it is monitored, by the way, his private email account, so that that traffic is appropriately captured and archived in the system. And he insists himself on using his state.gov primarily for his work. But it is impossible to completely take off the table the fact that some people send him emails on his private account. The same happens to me.
Is he?
Who monitors that?
There's somebody
the Russians or
on-
the Chinese?
There's somebody on our staff who
Gets copied in on every single email?
monitors his personal email
Do you
account
have-
so that it can be properly, so that those emails can be
But
all properly captured.
to Matt's point, are there concerns about the security of his private email, or are there extra measures taken?
I won't get into security measures, but I think you can safely assume that we take email security, particularly his, very, very seriously. But I won't get into publicly discussing.
But even within his private account, we know his state.gov presumably would have securities, but what about his private email, do you take extra measures there?
There's, of course, the appropriate security measures are taken, but I won't go into detail beyond that.
You said that Secretary Kerry's use of private emails is compliant with the department's rules and regulations, correct?
Correct.
Isn't that's the same position that the department had about Secretary Clinton's use of
At the
private
time,
email? At the
when
time,
she did
right.
it was in
Okay.
line with department policy. Department policy has changed,
Gotcha.
and the secretary is in compliance with the new policies.
Is he a day-to-day email? Does he email? Would you say he uses it every day?
The secretary uses email regularly. I don't have a record of how many he sends or receives on a daily basis, but of course he uses email regularly. Yeah, it's important to remember. It's not that you can't ever use a personal email. It's that it has to be properly captured and archived, and to the degree possible, shifted over to the state.gov account for further work. Yeah.
John, reportedly Qasem Soleimani visited Moscow last week, and I
Who?
was wondering, Qasem Soleimani.
Yeah, we've seen the reports. I'm in no position to confirm or deny that travel.
Yeah, and did Secretary Kerry send a letter to Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Iran deal, saying that Iran is fulfilling its obligations under the
This was a
international
normal
agreement?
certification letter required by the secretary to Congress that he submitted to Senator Corker. It basically lays out that thus far Iran has been complying with the JCPOA, but it was a normal required certification letter.
When was it sent?
Yesterday.
And are you releasing it publicly, or?
I don't know of plans to release it publicly. Yes.
Can I change the topic? Cuba? Cuba, yesterday they talked about the civil aviation. Do you have any comments on that and the diplomatic relationships?
Well, as you know, we released a media note about this today. So we did reach bilateral agreement to establish scheduled air services between the two countries. It's going to continue to allow charter operations, which exist now, and establish some scheduled air service, which will help facilitate an increase in authorized travel. And we've talked about the kinds of travel that is authorized and that which is not, which will enhance traveler choices and help, as we believe, to promote people-to-people links between Cuba and the United States. So it's an important step forward in the normalization process, but it is just one step. There are many more steps to come, obviously. So we welcome this agreement and look forward to seeing it get into effect. Yep.
I have a question on Iraq. There was a phone call today between Vice President Biden and Haider al-Abadi, where they both welcomed Turkey's pulling back its forces from Iraq. Can you confirm that the forces are actually being pulled back?
As you know, I'm not going to speak to military matters, Said. I would simply point you to what the public record has been on this, and Turkey should speak to Turkish military units. That's not my place to do that. But as I've said before, since the very beginning, we've urged the dialogue between Turkey and Iraq to work this out bilaterally, and we're encouraged by the dialogue that has continued to occur between the two countries on this issue.
John, on this topic, are you in touch with Turkey that their base in North Iraq was attacked by ISIL yesterday, and reportedly at least 4 Turkish soldiers were injured?
I'm sorry, I don't have an operational update for you on that. I'll take one more. Laura?
There's some early reporting that a planned attack on the U.S. consulate in Istanbul was thwarted, that there were some arrests made. Do you have anything on that? Is that something that the U.S. participated in at all?
I can't speak to specific security and intelligence matters. You saw that there were a series of security messages we put out last week, both in Ankara and Istanbul. We're working closely with Turkish authorities on these security threats. We wouldn't have issued those messages if we didn't have reason to do that, obviously. Security is a paramount concern. We take it very seriously, and we're going to continue to work with Turkish authorities as they work through examining these threats. But I can't go into any more detail than
But
that.
you can't say whether that threat's been resolved, because
I-
it sounds like maybe there's been some activity.
I can tell you we're always vigilant. We must always be vigilant for terrorist threats, and beyond that, I'm really not at liberty to go. Thank you, everybody.